Lawyer leaves wealthy client speechless in court, until the maid reveals an incredible truth. Sarah Lopez stood at the height of her career, her polished demeanor masking a tempest of conflict within. She had always believed in justice, in righting the wrongs that kept society off-kilter. But as she faced her first day in court representing Jonathan Blake, a glamorous CEO accused of corporate misconduct, an uncomfortable tension twisted in her stomach. It was heralded as her breakthrough until distraction in the courtroom unveiled the true stakes of her pursuit. Dressed in a tailored suit, Jonathan exuded arrogance, armed with wealth and a facade of confidence. He dismissed the severity of his allegations with a wave, brushing aside Anna, the maid who had watched silently from the periphery. As Sarah's mind raced, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease creeping through her like a shadow, the stark disparity filling the room. It was one thing to win, quite another to weigh her conscience against a growing mountain of evidence revealing the ugly truth of his empire. But would bringing that truth to light destroy not just a man, but the lives of those around him? With each passing moment, Sarah felt the scales tipping, her dedication to justice at odds with her aspirations and responsibilities. Encountering evidence of Jonathan's cover-ups, she found her moral compass faltering. How could she expose someone who had the power to dominate not just the courtroom, but the fates of countless employees like Anna? Before the trial unfolded, the weight of her decision loomed heavier. Her career pinnacle could harm the very community she had fought to protect. A battle not just for justice, but for the dignity of those like Anna who had faced Jonathan's blade of corporate greed without the armor of privilege. What if the price was too high? What if she could halt the impending destruction simply by walking away? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With a fraught breath, Sarah prepared to present her case. Then came the unexpected twist. Anna burst into the courtroom, visibly shaken but resolute. The air thickened as Sarah's heart raced. Jonathan's dismissive smirk did not waver, yet she could sense the trembling tide of change washing over the room. Anna's voice cut through the tension, each word a revelation that intertwined her life with the very misconduct Sarah sought to unveil. The courtroom gasped as Anna spoke, drawing connections between Jonathan's corporate dealings and the suffering of those in her community, seniors relying on the very system that Jonathan exploited for personal gain. From a life hidden in the shadows, Anna illuminated a truth that struck at the core of Jonathan's identity, unveiling the flaws just beneath his polished surface. Suddenly, the roles shifted. This was no longer an impersonal exchange of legal jargon but an ethical confrontation holding the weight of lives changed forever. Jonathan paled, his facade crumbling as Sarah faced the heavy responsibility of translating this moment into repercussions. Would he harness the chance for redemption or deflect the truth to protect himself? Panic surged within her, the stakes now impossibly high. The courtroom echoed with murmurs of realization, and Sarah found herself standing on the precipice of more than a case. Would the truth carve a path to justice, or would it entrap them all in chaos? An electric silence enveloped the courtroom, as if the very air had thickened under the weight of Anna's confession. Sarah's mind raced, trying to align the chaotic truths with her planned strategy. This was not merely a case anymore, it was a crucible that would test everything she believed in. "Your Honor," she stammered, her voice steady but laced with uncertainty. "I would like to request a brief recess." The judge nodded, granting her request as the tumult of whispers crescendoed around her. As Sarah stepped away from the chaos, she was engulfed in her thoughts. How had it come to this? The simple act of revealing a difficult truth was now spiraling into a full-blown ethical dilemma. She had pursued this case with a defined goal to create a splash on the legal scene, but the threat looming over innocent lives rushed forward like a tidal wave. What did this victory truly mean if it cost people like Anna their livelihoods? In the shadows of her own mind, Sarah wrestled with a nascent clarity. Holistic justice wasn't merely about winning the case, it was about ensuring the consequences did not ripple out destructively. Could she forsake her career as zenith? The weight of aspiration clashed violently with her burgeoning conscience. She paced the corridor, her heels clicking in a rhythm that mirrored the chaos within. What would it take to turn the courtroom in her favor? Not just a victory for herself, but genuine accountability for Jonathan. She needed a strategy that would uphold her morals and allow her to stand tall in the long run. Was she brave enough to bend the structures of law for a cause greater than herself? As the recess concluded, Sarah returned to her seat to find Jonathan sitting rigidly, his earlier bravado stripped bare. His intimidation tactics faltered under the pressure of a truth that no amount of money could silence. She caught his eye, searching for vulnerability amid the steel mask, wondering if he understood the implications of Anna's words. "Ms. Lopez," the judge's voice pierced through the atmosphere, refocusing attention. "Are you prepared to proceed?" Sarah inhaled deeply, the moment heightened. Could she wield the power of Anna's revelation without alienating herself from potential allies? She needed to pivot her case, amplify Anna's narrative, yet consolidate the courtroom's focus on the implications of Jonathan's actions. "Your Honor, if it pleases the court, I wish to introduce additional evidence that highlights the consequences of my client's actions, not only on the corporate scale but also on individuals like Ms. Anna," she declared, her voice firm as she paved the way for a broader discussion. For the first time, Jonathan's eyes betrayed a flicker of dread. As Sarah launched into the details of systemic exploitation, her resolve crystallized. She was more than just a mouthpiece, she was an advocate for those silenced, the spearhead of change threatening to uproot the very foundations of greed. With each word, the chamber felt alive, charged with possibility. Sarah's thoughts crystallized into plan, a means to not only dismantle Jonathan's reputation but to forge a narrative of true justice from the wreckage of corporate malfeasance. Just as Sarah was beginning to feel the momentum shift in her favor, something unexpected happened. An unmarked envelope slid discreetly into her hands from a familiar figure among the spectators. She opened it only briefly, catching a line that threatened to twist her current trajectory entirely. What lay within could shatter everything she was attempting to build in that courtroom. With her heart racing, she caught Jonathan's gaze, invoking his self-assured defiance. But what he didn't know about her resolve was the unfolding storm she now faced. "Your Honor, I need to address an urgent matter that has just come to light," she said, the room falling silent again, waiting for her next revelation. The room shifted with anticipation as Sarah stood before the judge, heart pounding yet fiercely resolved. The envelope lingered in her fingertips, the stark potential of its contents setting her nerves on edge. This was a moment that could alter the course of her career one way or another. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steadier than it felt, "I have received new information regarding this case that may significantly impact its outcome." She caught Jonathan's eyes flaring with indignation, the smirk from earlier now long gone. Fear pulsated through her system, this could backfire. Yet in the crossroads of her ambition and morality, she felt an undeniable clarity. "Proceed, Ms. Lopez," the judge prompted, curious yet cautious. Sarah opened the envelope, unfolding the single sheet with deliberate care. She sensed the collective breath of the courtroom as if the air had thickened again, pausing, waiting. Inside was a detailed account of alleged financial dealings linked to Jonathan himself, documents that tied him to fraudulent practices under the guise of legality, lending a different light to accusations meant to spotlight corporate irresponsibility. "Your Honor, this evidence indicates that Mr. Sinclair may have knowingly misled shareholders and mishandled funds, in dire consequence to employees like Ms. Anna. It's crucial for the court to consider how deep these roots of exploitation truly go." The weight her words carried pressed down on her with the gravity of the situation. She was no longer simply advocating, she was revealing the systemic rot underpinning Jonathan's empire. She watched as Jonathan's facade began to crack, the color draining from his face. The room erupted in murmurs, a sea of uncertainty as colleagues huddled together, glancing back and forth. "Objection!" Jonathan's voice barked, fierce yet showing cracks in his bravado. "This is irrelevant. This is a fishing expedition. Yet he faltered as Sarah met his eyes, unyielding. "Your Honor," she pressed, refusing to back down, "this isn't just about winning or losing, it's about revealing the truth behind the trust that has been betrayed in this very room. Lives are at stake. The moral fabric of our profession is intertwined with these decisions." A surge of passion coursed through her. This was what she had wanted all along, to use her platform for something over and beyond comprising teenagers of playmakers. The judge nodded, indicating the seriousness of Sarah's statement. "Continue, Ms. Lopez." Seeing her opening, Sarah shifted gears, seamlessly weaving the narrative of corruption with personal implications. Each connection she made revealed the intricate web of Jonathan's deceit, illuminating the impacts on those like Anna. The walls of Jonathan's calculated empire seemed to tremble, and she could sense the churning landscape beneath them shifting. Simultaneously, a nagging tension simmered in the back of her mind. What would the fallout be? The manipulation of evidence could jeopardize her standing long after this case concluded. She was walking a tightrope of integrity and ambition that felt perilously thin. As the session wore on, she drew strength from her convictions. Was her moral compass steering her in the right direction? Every time she stumbled upon her own hesitation, she recalled the faces of those affected like Anna and so many others working tirelessly for Jonathan's gain and receiving little in return. The courtroom buzz intensified, the drama unfolding into layers of scrutiny that began to encircle Jonathan like vines. She had ignited a spark, and it grew more powerful with every moment, each layer revealing more truths behind the smoke of financial manipulation. But as the judge called for order, Sarah's heart raced with new urgency. Facing the world renewed by this burst of revelation, she pondered what kind of lawyer she wanted to become. Would today mark the defining moment of her career, or simply another calculated move in the ongoing game? As Jonathan's eyes betrayed a desperate flicker, she pushed forward, ready to unveil one more bombshell. A final act that would either entrench her standing or expose her vulnerabilities. Her lips parted, the next words lingering precariously, on the cusp of a new storm. "Furthermore, I wish to call an unexpected witness to the stand who can shed light on these allegations." She waited, measuring the impact of her words against the silence that had fallen over the room. A surprise witness. The idea lingered in the air, thick with tension and curiosity. Each set of eyes shifted between her and the judge, eager for clarity, but much more, they were eager for a return to normalcy, to the certainty that had been disrupted. "Who is the witness?" Jonathan spat, a hint of desperation mingling with anger. The authenticity of her case, the stakes, all rested on the right answers now. "The maid who worked at the Sinclair residence," Sarah replied, feeling her conviction harden within her. "Her name is Maria, and she possesses insider knowledge of the dealings inside that very empire." Laughter erupted, mockery spilling out from Jonathan's corner as he regained composure. "You're seriously suggesting we listen to the ramblings of a domestic worker?" His derision hung in the air, but Sarah remained unperturbed. "Your Honor," she interjected, raising her voice slightly, "this is not just an ordinary maid. Maria has witnessed numerous transactions and conversations that detail Jonathan's misconduct, and her testimony can bridge the gap between the corporate gloss and the reality behind those closed doors." The judge hesitated, visibly weighing the gravity of the proposed testimony against Jonathan's standing. With every second that passed, Sarah could feel the weight of her decision pressing into her chest. She was not just gambling her career but also the fragile lives around her, the formless masses of workers who had long been dormant under the weight of indifference. "Very well," the judge finally stated, his tone serious, "we will allow this witness to take the stand." As Sarah nodded, adrenaline surged within her. Each heartbeat echoed a mix of exhilaration and anxiety. She had opened a door that could either lead to triumph or devastation. The floodgates of truth were about to swing wide, revealing secrets long buried. In anticipation, Sarah prepared her mind for the forthcoming confrontation. She needed to be razor-sharp, crafting a strategy that would allow her to navigate the unpredictable currents of the courtroom drama. What insights could Maria provide that would stand against Jonathan's polished defense? The door creaked open, and Maria entered the bespectacled woman clad in modest attire radiating a sense of resilience. As she took the stand, Sarah felt the air shift. This wasn't merely a witness, this was a conduit for truth, an anchor to the messy complexities lying beneath Jonathan's pristine narrative. With a steady voice, Sarah began her questioning. Maria, could you please describe any instance that you believe exemplifies Mr. Sinclair's unethical practices? Maria's eyes widened, her posture tense but firm. There was a transfer $0.5 million heading towards an offshore account, she began, her accent thick yet assuring in the weight of her words. I overheard conversations about using it to mask losses. It was always about profits, never about the people. Each revelation chipped away at Jonathan's facade, and Sarah felt the power of the narrative shift. She was pushing boundaries, forging connections that echoed far beyond corporate transgressions. Here was a chance to redefine her trajectory and solidify her values as a lawyer, but even as hope flared, a shadow of doubt sneaked in. Would Maria's testimony stick? Those in power often wielded a dangerous influence, and she knew Jonathan would fight tooth and nail to retain his dominion. Then, amid the second wave of revelations, her heart sank. If Maria was to be discredited, warned off by Jonathan's lawyers poised for retaliation, how much did Sarah have to protect her as well? As Jonathan's smirk faded under the pressure of uncertainty, Sarah realized that the truth was a double-edged sword. In her quest to expose corruption, she had begun to unravel her own motives. Was she driven by moral clarity or self-preservation? The line blurred painfully, and she braced herself for a confrontation that could rattle her very foundation. What price am I willing to pay for this? She whispered inwardly, a question she would have to answer sooner than she thought. The courtroom was no longer just a stage, it had become a battleground of integrity, and Sarah was poised for the fight. Tension gripped her as she readied for the next round, but what other secrets lay buried in the silence surrounding her? The courtroom buzzed with heightened energy, each hearing individual on the precipice of anticipation. The air thickened around Sarah as she watched Maria, now seated in the witness box, gaining confidence with each question. Sarah felt a flicker of pride course through her veins. The truth was finally being elevated from whispers to proclamations. Maria, she said, her tone deliberate, you mentioned overhearing details regarding the offshore account. Was there anyone else involved that you can recall? The question was layered, seeking connections that could unearth the broader conspiracy beneath Jonathan's surface. Maria hesitated, collecting her thoughts, and then replied swiftly. Yes, Robert, his financial advisor. They often met at odd hours. I saw them discussing transfers several times when I was cleaning, she revealed, a tremor of courage brightening her voice. Jonathan's grip on the table tightened, and an edge of panic replaced his earlier arrogance. Sarah couldn't help but feel exhilarated. Each word from Maria was another chink in his armor. This was not merely about winning a case, it was about reshaping perceptions of power and accountability. Yet, as the questioning progressed, self-doubt crept back in. The deeper they dug, the more scrutinized she felt by her own motivations. Was she safeguarding the truth for its sake, or was she simply pursuing victory to justify her own sense of worth? The gnawing question threatened to consume her focus. Sarah interjected smoothly, can you describe a specific moment where you noticed something unusual during these meetings? This line of inquiry was designed to keep the momentum, pivoting the attention off her internal struggles and back onto the emerging tapestry of wrongdoing. Once, Maria began, her expression tightening with the weight of memory, I overheard them arguing about tax evasion. Mr. Sinclair was furious about a potential audit. Robert assured him it would be taken care of with a new arrangement. Each statement amplified the stakes, the courtroom dynamic had shifted from disbelief to intrigue. Yet turmoil swirled within Sarah. She was risking not only her career but also Maria's safety. What if Jonathan retaliated? The thought ignited a flicker of unyielding determination. Your Honor, I ask that we summon Mr. Robert Davis to testify as well, Sarah stated, her voice steady, bolstered by the vision of broader accountability. The judge paused, eyeing the trajectory of the case with caution. Weighing all that had transpired, he allowed it. A ripple of tension surged through the room, and Sarah felt the adrenaline spike again, but this time it was laced with anxiety. Would Robert bring the same courage as Maria, or would it unravel under the pressure of Jonathan's influence? As the exchange continued, Jonathan's facade of confidence faltered, the sheen of his carefully constructed persona cracking. Yet, the courtroom was alive with potential, pushing her to the edge of everything she had worked for. The jury's expressions had shifted where once was skepticism, now flickered interest. It appeared they were beginning to grasp the breadth of Jonathan's transgressions. In that moment, Sarah clung tightly to the purpose driving her. She was not just pursuing a case or a client, she was carving a new reality for herself. The fierce echo of her own resilience intertwined with Maria's resolve, granting her the clarity she long sought, but even as hope invigorated her spirit, it was eclipsed by the looming silhouette of Jonathan, who was now scheming his next move behind dark eyes filled with menace. "Let us take a brief recess," the judge announced, and as the gavel struck, Sarah's pulse quickened. She had taken steps toward a monumental discovery, but she could feel the storm brewing. Would she have the courage to face whatever Jonathan had planned? More was at stake than just truth. The moment of reckoning loomed, as Sarah prepared to confront the demons that had haunted her ambition from the beginning. The question pulsed in the background like a drumbeat: what perilous secrets remained hidden, just below the surface? As the recess settled in, a disquieting silence enveloped the courtroom, thick with unspoken tension. Sarah stepped outside, the stakeholders still buzzing from the intensity of the session. In a corner, she took a deep breath, trying to center her thoughts. Maria's courage resonated within her, yet this newfound strength coexisted with the gnawing uncertainty about the impending testimony from Robert. Would he launch an even deeper inquiry into Jonathan's financial labyrinth, or would he retreat, shackled by loyalty? Sarah paced the hallway, her mind flickering back to her initial motivations for becoming a defense attorney. She wanted to contribute to a system that safeguarded the innocent, to mend the fractured trust between the law and those it served. But as the stakes escalated, she found herself drowning in the blurred lines of ambition and ethics, squeezing her determination until it felt like a vice. "Are you okay?" a colleague asked, pulling her from her trance. It was Marcus, one of the younger associates, with a look of sympathy that nearly broke her focus. "I was just evaluating the situation," she replied, masking her turmoil with practiced nonchalance. "We should be prepared for anything when we reconvene." Judging by the look on Jonathan's face as Maria spoke, he's sweating more than a cornered rat, he offered, attempting to lighten the mood. But his comment elicited a deeper truth from within her. There was more than just Jonathan's anxiety at play. There was a collective tension building, manifested through the fears of everyone involved. Sarah's internal compass flicked to responsibility, galvanizing her resolve. The upcoming confrontation with Robert demanded more than preparation, it required a reaffirmation of her values. It was time to intercept the narratives before they diverged into the shadows of doubt. Back in the courtroom, the buzz returned with a vengeance as they resumed. Sarah took her seat, her heart pounding in rhythm with the gavel's echo that signified the return of order. Robert Davis stepped into the witness box, looking rigid and clammy under the scrutinizing gaze of the jury. "Mr. Davis," Sarah began, maintaining her composure despite the pressure of 1,000 eyes. "We understand that you were involved in financial arrangements with Mr. Sinclair. Can you elaborate on your role in those discussions?" As Robert spoke, Sarah noticed the way his hands fidgeted, a tell that indicated his discomfort. "I advised him on investments, yes. But I don't know anything about tax evasion," he stammered, his voice a mix of practiced professionalism and subtle panic. "Is it true, then, that you and Mr. Sinclair were concerned about an impending audit?" Sarah pressed, determined to chip away at his facade. Each inquiry was methodical, crafted not just to collect information but to unearth character. With this pressure, Robert took a deep breath, resisting the urge to fold under scrutiny. "We discussed it, but it was nothing serious," he deflected, yet a quiver gave away his forced confidence. Interesting. And what did you mean when you said it would be taken care of with a new arrangement? Robert's eyes darted around the courtroom. Suddenly, a moment of realization flickered in Sarah's mind. His shifting demeanor was betraying thoughts darker than mere anxiety. Something crucial was anchored in his evasions. As her questioning continued, Robert's responses shifted from resistant to dangerously ambiguous, revealing cracks in his composure. This was no longer just about the audacity of Jonathan's trust in his advisor, it was becoming a tale of connivance steeped in fear. Each answer from Robert echoed Sarah's own fight against despair and doubt, pulling her deeper into the realms of conviction she believed in. There was no backing down now, she felt the weight of sweat trickling through her palms. With each passing moment, the stakes grew higher, churning her anxieties into clarity. She was not merely defending her case. She was unearthing a truth that could potentially undo the very fabric of wealth and influence. That encased Jonathan and Robert alike, but as every answered question led to another, the shadows cast by Jonathan's past acts loomed larger. What other allies lay hidden within this web of deceit? Sarah locked her gaze on Robert, her heart steeling against uncertainty. The battle within her raged on, testing her will to confront whatever truths were waiting to surface. As the courtroom hung in apprehensive silence, the question pulsed starkly in her mind: would Robert finally break, exposing Jonathan's empire of lies, or cover for the shadows lurking in the dark? The air in the courtroom felt electric as the intense scrutiny bore down on Robert like an anvil. Sarah noted the ripple of concern crossing the jury's faces. Each second stretched, amplifying the weight of the moment. Time held its breath as if the fate of the case, and indeed her career, swung in the balance of Robert's forthcoming words. "Mr. Davis," Sarah pressed again, her demeanor unwavering, "let's reflect on that arrangement. Who was it meant to benefit, truly? You or Mr. Sinclair?" His lips quivered as he formulated an answer, the hesitation a crack in his resolve. "We were just making adjustments," he replied, a phrase that felt like a lifeline thrown in turbulent waters. Adjustments. The word dripped with implication, sending a jolt through Sarah's body. The layers of his rhetoric were peeling back, revealing threads of complicity that intertwined with Jonathan's wealth. She fought to maintain focus, sifting through the unreality of the situation. This was more than a title dealing with money, this was a painfully intricate tapestry woven with manipulation, loyalty, and deception. Adjustments to what? Your credibility? To morality? Sarah's voice rose slightly, luring the room's attention even deeper into her spell. "How can we trust your testimony when it seems built upon an unstable foundation of betrayal?" An unsettling silence enveloped the courtroom once more. Robert's eyes grimaced, a mix of fear and indignation. "That's not fair." He shot back, the sharpness of his voice surprising even him. The jury watched closely, their judgment already shaping around his defiance. The air shifted. Sarah could feel her heart rattle against the cage of her ribs, sensing the tide turning. The robustness of her previous doubts melted into a resilient fire in her chest, a primal urge that urged her to push forward. "Fairness is exactly what we seek here. Did you ever consider that your loyalty to your boss may have neglected your duty to honesty?" Each word was measured, fuel for the advancing flame of resolve within her. This was her moment, the crux of transformation. It wasn't just about winning the case but redefining her ethos. She thought of Maria's courage, of the flames they both navigated. With every calculated question, each answered lie she laid bare, her strength surged, coaxing forth the champion within who had long been buried beneath layers of doubt. Did Maria's testimony spur you to reconsider your allegiances? Or are you content in keeping secrets at the expense of integrity? The tables were now visibly turning as Robert stammered, the fight leaking from him like air from a deflating balloon. Sarah could sense the perilous edge beneath his facade, a crack beyond mere anxiety. It felt like a vital truth was on the precipice of emerging. "Maria? She's not part of this." He protested, but the urgency in his voice couldn't mask the weakness of his defiance. With every inch of his backpedaling, she felt her own footing solidify, bolstered by an electric sense of purpose. Yet she stood up for what is right, risking everything, Sarah replied, slowly letting those words linger. And here you are, faced with your moment of truth. Will you follow her lead or drown further in the abyss of complicity? Her question hung in the air, thick with expectation, each offense against Robert's confidence chipping away at what he cocooned as loyalty. Sarah understood there was power in honest vulnerability, and she willed him to realize it. His eye contact faltered as the emptiness behind his defenses began to fathom the weight of his decision. As Robert wrestled with his silence, Sarah felt a fracture under her feet, a crack in the justice system she fervently believed in, something lit by the fireplace of each encounter made in that courtroom. She could not linger in vengeance. She needed to understand that the path she forged through this chaos could disclose the truth buried deep within this labyrinth, but just then, a rustle at the back caught her attention. A figure, cloaked in the shadows of the courtroom, turned to glance her way, an enigmatic energy radiating from them. Her heart raced. Was this another witness, one that could tip the entire scale further? As the tension tethered between resolve and uncertainty, Sarah's gaze locked onto this new arrival, fear and anticipation mingling. The depths of her journey had only begun. What revelations lay ahead, waiting to be drawn out of concealment? The figure in the back of the courtroom shifted slightly, and for a fleeting second, Sarah caught a glimpse of a sharp, angular face framed by a cascade of curls. She was sure she recognized the maid from the Sinclair estate, a quiet presence who often blended into the background, but today she appeared to wield an unspoken power. Sarah's heart quickened, not just from anticipation but from a burgeoning sense of opportunity. The weight of the courtroom felt lighter. The unbearable tension surrounding Robert Davis could, perhaps, be shared with this unexpected witness. "Your Honor, I request a brief recess," Sarah called out, her voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd, filled with murmurs of disbelief. She needed a moment to gather her thoughts, to set her strategy unfolding. The judge, momentarily nonplussed, agreed and banged his gavel, allowing a hush to settle over the room as everyone processed the request. As she stepped away from the table, Sarah cast a glance at the maid, whose eyes were alight with urgency. There was a story hidden behind that calm exterior, one that could reshape the narrative they were weaving in legal jargon. With a surge of determination, Sarah approached the maid, wondering if she would have the courage to speak up. "You know something, don't you?" Sarah said, lowering her voice so only the maid could hear. "I need to know. It could change everything." The maid hesitated, glancing nervously at the jury and then back to the floor. There are things I shouldn't say," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Things you shouldn't say or things you're scared to admit?" Sarah pressed, feeling an urgency that still echoed the turmoil. The maid swallowed hard, the fight within her visible. "I could lose my job," she said, her eyes pleading but steady. "These people, their money, it's powerful. Your job is at stake regardless if you want to ignore the truth," Sarah countered gently. "What is at stake is the truth itself. And the longer you stay silent, the more lives are affected." They locked eyes, a silent rebellion passing between them. Sarah knew she was treading unknown territory. This wasn't simply court strategies and legal maneuvering, this was about morality intertwined with secrecy. The maid glanced back at the rows of spectators, then leaned in closer. "Mr. Sinclair has been dishonest." Each word fell cautiously, like a fragile egg about to shatter. "There are documents, secret dealings that could hurt a lot of people." "Documents?" The pulse of adrenaline shot through Sarah. "What kind of documents? Where?" "Hidden in the study." "I can show you," the maid said, each word spilling forth with more gravity. In that moment, Sarah felt a seismic shift, not just in the potential fortunes of the case but in her own identity. The intuition she'd honed, the debates that had brewed within, were all converging into a single truth. Here was a chance to stand up for what she believed in, not just to prosecute a case but to expose corruption at its roots. As she absorbed the maid's words, a fire ignited in Sarah's chest. The stakes were rising, and each second spent standing still meant leaving Robert's lies unchecked, letting their poisonous reach extend further. "All right, let us go," she said, her voice steady. "We'll do this together." After they hurried to the study, Sarah scheduled to meet the maid later to obtain the evidence, acutely aware of the risk of exposing her support for the woman in a world that often shunned the vulnerable. She returned to the courtroom, determination knitting together her resolve. It was now or never. The time had come to engage with the truth and with it, her own burgeoning sense of purpose in the legal world. She would not just be a bystander to the game anymore, she would become a player, fortifying her values while barreling through the veils of deception. As the gavel struck again, signaling the end of the recess and the return of the tension, Sarah's mind raced through her next steps. How would she utilize the information gained from the maid? Would the truth finally bring the unraveling of the deception surrounding Jonathan Sinclair? With the jurors' eyes on her and uncertainty simmering among the responses, Sarah caught a glimpse of potential victory on the horizon. But just as she prepared to confront Robert with renewed energy, a shadow slid across her path. An unknown male figure lingered by the courtroom door, a smirk curling at the edges of his lips, a potential complicating force she had not accounted for. In that instant, Sarah knew the battle was only intensifying, and she would have to rise to meet every challenge ahead. Secrets were turning into weapons, and the stakes were escalating. What was this man's role in the playground of corruption? The moment had arrived where Sarah would have to stake everything on the decisions she made. Would she reveal the conspiracies hidden deep within the Sinclair operations, or would this new threat cast her back into shadows? As Sarah resumed her place at the table, the pulse of the courtroom quickened, electric with tension. She stole another glance at the male figure near the door, trying to read the expression on his face. The smirk suggested a nonchalance that sent shivers down her spine. Who was he? What did he want? She took a breath, letting her internal chaos settle into a focused resolve. It was vital to stay composed and strategic. The maid's revelation had opened a door, and now it was up to Sarah to decide how far she would push through. The judge called the court back to order, yet Sarah's mind was racing. She couldn't lose sight of the opportunity that lay before her. The maid had given her a glimmer of hope, not just for the case but for her own self-discovery, a testament to her tenacity. This was her moment, the chance to embody the principles she had fought relentlessly for since her first day as a lawyer. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice firm, projecting confidence that didn't entirely match the tempest within. "Today, we delve deeper into the truth surrounding the Sinclair estate. We will unravel a web of deceit, and I assure you, justice will not be delayed." As she spoke, Sarah's gaze drifted briefly back to the maid's seat, but it was the lurking figure that preoccupied her thoughts. What could this man possibly know? Did he hold any information that could thwart her progress? She had been trained to face fear head-on, but there was a deeper layer to this confrontation, a mirror reflecting her own uncertainties. It wasn't just about exposing a corrupt man, it was about her commitment to her values, her capacity to fight against the shadows of privilege and power. Could she navigate this labyrinth without losing herself in the process? With newfound fire in her belly, Sarah looked directly into Robert's eyes. His expression was taut, that same smug confidence wafting off him like a privilege-laden fragrance. This was the moment she would catch him off guard. She sensed his anticipation and found strength in her own vulnerability. "Mr. Sinclair," she declared, unapologetically direct, "you have built an empire on a foundation of lies, and the time for accountability is at hand." The courtroom held its breath, sweeping whispers cascading through rows of observers as she pressed on. She recounted initial inconsistencies in his testimony, intricacies of economic transactions, showcasing the patterns of deceit that had slowly antagonized the community. Every word was weighted with intention, meant to strike at the core of Robert's crumbling claim. In that fluid rhythm of discourse, Sarah could hear her thoughts sharpening with clarity. With each point she made, her confidence solidified. She could feel the balance of power shifting, not just in this trial but within herself. She was no longer seeking approval, she was crafting her own narrative, stepping into her authority. Then came a calculated pause. The courtroom quieted, awaiting her next revelation. She was ready to introduce the maid's testimony, to anchor it in the prepared terrain of evidence she would unveil as soon as she recognized the opening, but just then, that male figure made his move, striding toward her with purpose. As he approached, Sarah's heart raced anew, sensing the weight of his presence inching closer to her in defiance. "You think you have control of this situation, don't you?" he drawled, his voice smooth yet cutting. "Let us see how long that bravado lasts." Tension crackled between them, like a game of chess with stakes far beyond mere pieces on the board. Sarah stood her ground, feeling her breath hitch before she summoned every ounce of determination. She realized at that moment that this was not merely an off-script moment, it was a test of everything she had been striving for, courage in the face of intimidation and the unyielding pursuit of truth. As the figure loomed, Sarah knew she could not back down, the pieces were falling into place. The maid's revelation lay in her pocket, but showing it required more than bravery. It demanded calculated risk and unveiling that could alter the course of this entire trial and echo far beyond the courtroom walls. "Your threats won't work on me," Sarah replied, her voice steady with defiance, a steel edge weaving through her words. "The truth is coming, whether you like it or not." What she did next would define her not just as a lawyer but as a fighter for justice. Would she expose the truth she now held, risking everything on the edge of a thrilling revelation? The courtroom was still, the tension palpable, and in that heartbeat, Sarah steeled herself for the plunge into chaos. As the figure smirked wider, Sarah felt the weight of her decision settle over her, and in that instant, she understood the battle was reaching a crescendo. The stakes had never been higher, every action reverberating through her own journey of integrity. What would her next decision unravel? Would her commitment to the truth be the beginning of her professional ascent, or would it plunge her deeper into the shadows she sought to escape? The gavel echoed through the courtroom, marking the end of chaos and the dawn of unanticipated clarity. Sarah Lopez stood renewed, fortified by the revelations she had unearthed and the bold testimonies that had unfolded. The male figure looming by the door, the ominous threat, had been met with an unyielding defiance that echoed within her. The truth would out, it was the essence of her very being. As the final arguments drew near, Sarah felt the weight of all she had encountered converging into a singular mission. Before her were the mangled remnants of Jonathan Sinclair's facade, the lifeblood of those who had fought tirelessly against the machine of corporate deceit. It was more than just a case, it was a reset of countless lives yearning for justice and accountability. Today, she stood for them, with a steady voice, she addressed the jury. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, let us not be swayed by wealth or status. Jonathan Sinclair has forged a world where power blinds truth. What we unveil here is a narrative of manipulation, a misrepresentation that not only anchors his empire but seeks to invalidate the dignity of every hard-working individual who suffered under its weight." The room thrummed with tension, the jury's attention sharp as Sarah detailed the layers of deception that had unraveled. She spoke of Maria's courage, her testimony weaving the stark realities into an intricate argument that sparked empathy even in the staunchest hearts. Bank statements, video evidence, and Maria's insights combined to create an undeniable narrative, one that the enormity of Sinclair's wealth could not suppress. He sat there, visibly diminished, the mask of invulnerability shattered. This was not just a courtroom blip, it was a reckoning that would haunt him long after the gavel fell. Sarah had not only confronted Jonathan, she had embraced a larger calling, a pledge to ensure every corner of the system was illuminated with truth. As she pressed on, she could feel the transformation coursing through her. The hesitant lawyer of yesterday had given way to an impassioned advocate today. Gone was her fear of judgment, of straddling the line between ambition and morality. She was redefining success not by accolades or titles but by her choices, her advocacy, and the truth she had chosen to elevate. Then came the moment. An unexpected silence hung in the air as she initially resisted the urge to deliver her final punch. Instead, she chose to frame her closing with an appeal to humanity. In our relentless pursuit of success, let us not forget those we serve. We have an obligation not just to our careers but to the very fabric of our society. I chose to fight for those standing on the margins, for those rendered invisible by suits of greed. This case is a microcosm of those truths. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, as if the air quivered with a shared understanding. This was a pivotal moment. It would reveal who they were stern enough to embrace what justice meant beyond numbers, beyond standing the visibility and humanity behind the veil. Jonathan's expression shifted from smug disdain to an almost childlike fear. Whatever fabric of lies he spun began to feel threadbare under the harsh glare of Sarah's convictions. There was nowhere left to hide. Your Honor, she concluded, voice steady but resonant, I am not merely requesting a verdict against a man, I am advocating for the countless lives intertwined within these shadows. To choose truth is to choose courage, a path that extends far beyond this courtroom. Let justice ring loud and clear. The gavel struck once more, but it was not done. This was not merely the end of a trial, it marked the beginning of Sarah's ascent. As she stepped away, the jury filed out to deliberate, and the room shimmered with the solemn weight of her declaration. A ripple of recognition passed through her colleagues, whispers of admiration for how she had confronted the core of a moral crisis. Later, as the verdict was read, Sarah felt the rush of validation. Guilty. The sense of rightness cascaded through her like a wave, each heartbeat echoing an undeniable truth. She had transformed from a mere practitioner to an uncompromising advocate of justice. The fulfillment surged deeply within her. Beyond recognition, beyond the fleeting nature of success, this moment proved how one could dare to wrestle with the complexity of morality while remaining firmly anchored in integrity. She had achieved it, the unearthly blend of professional accomplishment intertwined with the unwavering commitment to herself, to truth, and to those who needed her most. Standing alone on that courtroom floor, Sarah felt more than satisfaction. She reveled in her growth, the tough lessons learned, and the realization that her integrity was her greatest asset. This was her victory, one that transcended her title, defining her not just as a lawyer, but as a champion. Today was her triumph, and it was just the beginning. You need to subscribe now to this channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like right now to feed the algorithm, it really matters. Comment your reactions and theories about this jaw-dropping conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who could benefit from this powerful story of personal overcoming.